The sharp pain shooting through Emily Carter's right arm was nothing compared to the terror tightening around her chest as she curled herself into the corner of the bathroom, her left hand trembling as it clutched her phone. Blood seeped from the torn skin of her upper lip, and she could already feel her right eyelid swelling, her vision blurring beneath the sting of tears and injury. Through the thin door, she heard the heavy footsteps of Josh Turner pacing across the bedroom, each step punctuated by an endless stream of angry muttering. "Emily." He called, his voice coated with a sweetness so false it chilled her more than the pain. "Baby, come out. I'm sorry. You know I didn't mean it." She had heard those words 100 times before, but tonight was different. Tonight he had gone too far. Her right arm hung at an unnatural angle, and even the softest breath sent waves of jagged pain tearing through her ribs. She needed help. She needed to get out. Her fingers trembled as they tapped across the cracked screen, opening an old conversation with her mother, typing each word with the thumb of her left hand. Every keystroke a battle through the fog of panic. "Mom, please save me." Josh broke my arm. "I am so scared. He will not let me leave." She hit send and waited, her heart pounding so violently against her bruised chest she felt it might burst. The phone buzzed. Relief flooded her for a fleeting second until she read the message. "Who is this?" "You texted the wrong person." Her heart plunged. No, this cannot be happening. She reopened the conversation and felt her blood turn to ice. In her frantic state, she had sent the message to a number she didn't recognize, one not even saved in her contacts. She had mistyped while her vision swam with pain and swelling. Before she could process the new surge of panic, another message appeared. "Where are you? Are you safe?" Outside the door, Josh's voice shifted. The fake softness vanished entirely. "I am going to count to 3. Emily, and then I am breaking this door down." Emily curled tighter into herself, every part of her body trembling, as if each cell understood this was the moment life could end. She stared at her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with desperate speed. "I am locked in the bathroom. Lakeview Heights apartment 15 floor 2. Do not call the police. If they come, he will kill me. He has ties to someone dangerous." 1. Her heart hammered so fast she thought she might faint. 2. A message arrived. "I am sending someone. Do not open the door. Keep your phone with you." 3. The doorknob twisted hard, followed by a thunderous crash as the flimsy door burst open. Josh filled the doorway, his eyes bloodshot, his face twisted with rage. "Who texted you?" he roared, storming toward her. "Who got that message, Emily?" She could not answer, could not think. He seized her broken arm and squeezed. Her scream ripped from her throat, raw and unrestrained. "I sent it to the wrong number," she sobbed. "I did not mean to. Please, Josh, please." He released her and she collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking with pain. He paced in frantic circles, tugging at his hair, and for the first time she saw something besides anger in his eyes. Fear. "You idiot. You have no idea what you have just done. If anyone finds out, if my boss learns, I cannot control my girlfriend." He didn't finish. He kicked the vanity so hard, the wood splintered. Through the ringing in her ears, Emily heard something else. The slam of a car door. Footsteps fast and determined echoing up the stairwell outside the hallway. Josh heard it too. His head snapped toward the front door. "Who is that?" he hissed. "Who did you call?" But this time his voice was no longer steady. It shook. In the midst of that swirling chaos, just before the story crossed into a new threshold, filled with tension and unexpected turns, if you are following Emily's journey and feel your own heart tightening with every breath she takes, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, to like and share, so that this story can travel farther, allowing you to experience moving and powerful videos like this every single day. And if you are listening from somewhere far away, please leave a comment below and tell us where in the world you are hearing this story from so we can feel how many hearts Emily's journey has reached. We cherish every comment, every feeling shared, every step you take alongside us. Thank you so very much. The bathroom door hung crooked on its hinges after Josh's devastating kick, and his gaze swept across the cramped room with the wild hunger of a predator. Emily pressed herself deeper into the corner, her body trembling beyond her control. He moved toward her in heavy, deliberate steps, his hands clenched, breath hissing out of him like an animal stripped of reason. The phone was still in her hand, its screen glowing softly, and before Josh could reach her again, a third message appeared. I am coming. Keep your phone with you. Do not open the door. Emily did not understand why she trusted someone who was a complete stranger. She did not know his name, did not know who owned that number. But the words on the screen felt like the final piece of driftwood in the storm she was drowning in. She looked up, fighting for calm, hiding the phone behind her back. Josh knelt down in front of her, his arms circling her waist, squeezing until her entire body locked in pain. What did you do, Emily? He hissed, his voice scraping through clenched teeth. Who did you call, the police or some man? Emily shook her head over and over, breath coming fast and shallow, holding back tears. I only texted my mother, but I typed the wrong number. I swear, I do not know who that person is. Josh stared at her as if he could scrape the truth from the panic in her eyes. Then he stood, yanked the towel from the wall, wrapped it around the phone in her hand, and hurled it into the sink. Emily cried out instinctively, a sharp burst of pain rising through her ribs. If someone comes here, I will handle it. Trust me, Josh muttered. His eyes locked on the front door as if he sensed something coming. Outside, the footsteps grew louder. Not one person, two, perhaps three. Shoes striking the old apartment hallway floor in steady, unhurried rhythm, each step beating like war drums inside Emily's chest. Josh's agitation sharpened. He ran from the bathroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it from the outside. She heard his hurried movements as he rushed to the front door, peering through the peephole. There was no doorbell, no knocking. Only a chilling silence stretching for several long seconds as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then a soft knock echoed once. Not polite, but deliberate, rhythmic, and cold like a warning. Josh did not answer. A heartbeat later, the door shuddered violently. A sound followed, deep and forceful, as if a broad shoulder had slammed into the wood. Josh staggered back. Emily inside the bathroom held her breath. She heard the lock snap and the hinges creak under strain. Josh roared, I am warning you. This is private property. Get out now. A man's voice responded, low and steady, wrapped in a cold restraint that carried far more danger than shouting. Where is Emily Carter? No names were exchanged, no explanations given. Emily felt her blood run upward inside her veins when he spoke her full name. A heavy crash followed, something slamming into furniture, then a thud like a body hitting the wall. She heard Josh shouting mixed with hurried footsteps. And then the bathroom door swung open. Light from the outer room spilled in and a tall man stepped through. He wore a charcoal coat and in his hand was the phone displaying the final message she had sent. His eyes were a steel gray, expressionless at first, but when they landed on her, something in them softened into something entirely different. Are you Emily? He asked, his voice firm and even. She could not speak, her throat tightening with a mixture of shock and fear. He turned his head and spoke to someone outside the doorway. Bring the kit. Be careful with her right arm. Do not let her stand on her own. Another man appeared, immediately younger and swift, carrying a medical bag. Emily still did not know who they were, but somehow she knew she had just been saved. And the man who saved her was the one who had received her mistaken message tonight. Emily could not recall exactly how she was lifted out of the bathroom, only that the man's arms were steady and warm and impossibly safe, the complete opposite of everything she had endured moments earlier. The man named Nathan did not speak much yet. The look in his eyes as he took in her bruised face and broken arm carried a deep, controlled fury. Not the explosive kind that Josh wielded, but the cold and focused anger of someone with real power, someone who would do anything necessary to protect. As they moved through the narrow hallway toward the living room, Emily saw Josh pinned by a larger man, his arm twisted behind his back, his face contorted with pain. "She is my girlfriend," Josh shouted. "You have no right to be here. I will sue all of you." Nathan did not turn. He simply lowered Emily gently onto the sofa before slowly facing him, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You hit her. You broke her arm. You locked her in the bathroom. And you think you have any rights here?" His voice was low and even, never raised yet. It silenced the entire room. Josh struggled wildly, but the man restraining him tightened his grip until Josh groaned. Emily curled in on herself, cradling her throbbing arm, watching it all through a haze, as if she were witnessing a scene in a film rather than living it. Nathan stepped closer to Josh, only a few feet away. "Your full name?" "Josh Turner," he spat. "I am not afraid of you." "That is where you are wrong," Nathan murmured. "You should be afraid." He signaled for the guard to drag Josh toward the balcony. Josh kicked and cursed all the way, but he might as well have been fighting a steel wall. Nathan then pulled out his phone and spoke to someone in a language Emily did not recognize, something that sounded like Russian or another Eastern European tongue. He spoke briefly, decisively, then hung up. Emily watched him, trying to steady the tremor running through her body. "Who are you?" she whispered. Nathan did not answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer and knelt in front of her. "My name is Nathan Bishop," he said slowly. "Tonight, you sent a message to the wrong person. I received it, and I came here for one reason. You needed to be saved, but you do not know me. Why would you come? Because I do not ignore a cry for help, even from a stranger." Nathan glanced toward the man tending her arm. "Be careful. The right arm may have fractures in both the radius and ulna. Do not worsen it." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "Are you a doctor?" Nathan shook his head lightly. "No, I am simply a man who does not tolerate men who hurt women." She did not know why she believed him, but she did. When the private medical team arrived with a specialized trauma kit, Nathan stepped aside quietly to let them examine her. Josh remained restrained on the balcony, still spitting curses into the cold night air, but no one paid him the slightest attention. Every pair of eyes was on her. For the first time in many years, Emily felt seen, heard, and protected. She closed her eyes as tears slipped free, not from pain, but from something far more unfamiliar: safety. Nathan sat beside her in silence, his hand resting gently on hers, not gripping, simply present. She turned to look at him again. He did not smile, did not speak, but his eyes said everything. She was no longer alone, and everything was about to change. The black SUV sped through the silent streets of Chicago in the deep hours of the night, gliding like a shadow. Emily sat hunched in the back, wrapped in a soft wool coat handed to her from the front seat, her arm secured in a temporary splint and layers of white bandages. She did not know where she was going, did not know who these men were, only that Nathan sat beside her, and somehow his presence alone erased the fear that should have swallowed her whole. But her mind spun endlessly. She had just been pulled out of the hell she had lived in for years, a place she had believed until only a few hours ago had no exit. Everything had happened too fast, too unreal. She leaned her head against the window, but when she closed her eyes, she saw nothing but Josh's furious face, the door flying off its hinges, his hand crushing her arm, and the suffocating snap of bone giving way. She retched into a plastic bag the guard in the front seat handed her just in time. Nathan said nothing, only handed her a tissue before quietly pulling out his phone to send a message. 15 minutes later, the vehicle stopped in front of a low building with a facade of frosted glass and stainless steel. No sign, no neon lights yet. It was clear it was no ordinary clinic. Nathan helped her out of the SUV, not lifting her, not forcing her, just a steady, gentle support, as though he feared she might break if he held her too firmly. Inside, a silver-haired man in a white lab coat was already waiting. He nodded to Nathan and spoke in a British voice tinged with an Eastern European cadence. "Everything is ready." Emily was guided into a spotless, quiet room bathed in soft light. The Dr. Keller began examining her from head to toe, asking no unnecessary questions. He worked as though every bruise carried meaning, every cut bore witness, every touch had purpose. Her right forearm was fractured in 2 places. 3 ribs showed signs of cracks. Her lip required 3 stitches. Her right eyelid was swollen and bloodshot, and her slow pulse indicated mild shock. Emily remained silent. She did not cry, did not speak. When the needle pierced her arm for pain medication, she only closed her eyes briefly. When the doctor finally asked her a question, she realized her throat felt as dry as paper. "Do you feel pain in your abdomen?" She nodded faintly. "I need to check internal organs. We need a CT scan." She did not know whether she nodded again. She only heard machines humming, doors opening and closing, someone calling her name, but she could not bring herself to answer. Nathan was still there. When she was wheeled out of the scanning room, he was standing at the doorway, his eyes following her as if her life depended on staying within his sight. After more than an hour, everything was done. Emily's wounds were cleaned, stitched, her arm reset and stabilized, fluids administered, and she was taken back to the recovery room. Dr. Keller said she needed several hours of rest before traveling again. She lay still on the bed, listening to the steady beeping of the heart monitor echo through the room. When Nathan walked in, she did not turn her head. "I do not understand what is happening," she whispered. "I sent a message to the wrong number. I was supposed to die tonight, but you showed up." Nathan sat in the chair beside her, his eyes never leaving her face. "You did not die because you did the right thing. You called for help, and I heard you. I do not know anything about you. I do not even know if I am dreaming." "This is not a dream," he paused, his voice dropping to something that felt like a vow. "Tonight, no one has the right to lay a hand on you again." Emily closed her eyes, saying nothing. For the first time in 3 long years, she felt like she was no longer invisible. She did not know what would come next, but she knew more clearly than anything she had ever known that her old life had ended the moment that message was sent. And a new life was beginning, even if she was not yet ready to receive it. The sky had faded into a tired shade of grayish-purple when Emily woke again. She was no longer in the clinic, but in a spacious, silent apartment that felt entirely unfamiliar. Morning light slipped through thin white curtains, settling across a high ceiling and glimmering on polished wooden floors. She lay on a large, immaculate bed, surrounded by elegant furnishings in warm, neutral tones. There was no scent of disinfectant anymore, only the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the unfamiliar warmth of a place that felt safe. Her right arm remained splinted and carefully wrapped. A bottle of water sat on the bedside table next to a black phone and a handwritten note. Emily picked up the paper, recognizing the clear, steady handwriting. "You are safe. No one can find you here. If you need anything, use the phone beside you. I will take care of everything. Nathan." She reread those words several times, not because she did not understand them, but because they felt so foreign to the life she knew. Who was this man? How could someone she had never met, someone who had received a single misdirected message in the middle of the night, come to rescue her, bring her to a private doctor, and then move her into a place like this? She forced herself upright, every muscle crying out in protest. Each step toward the window felt heavy and unsteady. When she pulled back the curtain, the entire city of Chicago stretched beneath the high-rise building, bathed in the soft light of dawn. This apartment was not a temporary refuge. This was the kind of place people paid tens of thousands of dollars each month just to set foot in. In the kitchen, a sleek stainless steel refrigerator was fully stocked with food, accompanied by a handwritten set of instructions on how to warm the meals and a tray of carefully labeled medication. Beside the phone was a contact list containing only two names, Nathan and Victor. She did not know who Victor was, though she assumed he was the younger man who had helped bandage her in the clinic. She did not call. She did not know what she would even say. Instead, she walked through the apartment as if searching for clues about the man named Nathan Bishop. Everything was impeccably arranged down to the smallest detail. Yet there were no signs of a life lived here, no personal photographs, no books, no marks of someone's daily presence. It felt as though the apartment existed for one singular purpose: to receive her. She sat on the sofa by the window, her mind spinning under the weight of too many questions. Who was Nathan? What kind of person could mobilize people in the dead of night, summon a private doctor, own an empty luxury apartment, and operate with such quiet efficiency that no police ever appeared? A cold shiver ran down her spine as she recalled Josh's warnings about the men he was connected to. The power, the danger, the people no one dared to cross. Was Nathan part of that world? Had she escaped one predator only to fall into the territory of another? A message appeared on the new phone, making her flinch. "Are you awake? How are you feeling? I will stop by this afternoon if you feel up to it." Nathan. Emily stared at the screen. There was no tone of control, no demand, no intrusion. Only concern, measured and restrained. And that more than anything frightened her. Men like that did not need threats to hold power. They only needed to exist. She did not respond. She set the phone down and turned back to the distant city beyond the window. Inside her, something was unraveling, a tangle of gratitude, fear, curiosity, and a nameless sense that her life had taken a turn from which there would be no return. By late afternoon, when the last threads of sunlight slipped across the rooftops of the city, Emily was still seated beside the wide glass window, the place where she had spent nearly the entire morning and noon, simply watching the world below, studying the small, ordinary movements of life. Everything seemed strangely normal, while she herself felt as though she had just stepped out of a nightmare that still clung to her skin like a cold shadow. Her phone vibrated softly. A message appeared, short and unadorned. "Have you eaten?" She stared at those words for a long time. 4 simple words. No exclamation mark, no emoji. Yet they tightened something deep in her throat. Emily did not answer right away. She opened the refrigerator, warmed a serving of chicken soup that had been prepared, ate it one spoonful at a slow, steady pace, and only then picked up the phone. "I just ate. Thank you." In less than a minute, another message arrived. "Good. Rest after you eat. You need to recover both physically and mentally." Nathan asked nothing more. He did not push for conversation. He did not pry into what she was feeling, nor demand to know what was happening inside her mind. He left only brief messages scattered gently throughout the day, enough to let her know she had not been abandoned yet, never so much that she felt watched. The next morning, when Emily woke from a restless sleep, a message was already waiting. "Do not go outside yet. The wind is strong today. You should rest. If you want to read, check the drawer under the TV." She followed the instruction. Inside the drawer were several hardcover books, mystery novels, and psychological fiction. None of them looked new. The scent of freshly printed pages had long faded. These books had been read, handled, cared for. Strangely, that comforted her more than the luxury items scattered throughout the apartment. Someone had once touched these pages. It was a small piece of something real in the midst of so much unfamiliarity. She began to read, sitting in the armchair near the window, her arms still throbbing, but her mind lighter than it had been in days. By afternoon, another message appeared. "Are you doing all right today?" She replied simply. "I am reading The Silent Patient. It is good." His answer came. "I like that book as well. The storytelling is both cold and painful, a bit like you." Emily reread that message several times, unsure how to respond. She did not think he was flirting. It felt more like an observation than a compliment, a quiet way of saying he saw her, saw the pieces inside her even without asking her to reveal them. On the third day, Nathan sent a bag of items, not through strangers, but carried upstairs by Victor himself, who placed it by the door and said only a gentle reminder to rest. Inside the bag were a soft hoodie, a pair of sweatpants, a few personal care items, a bottle of fragrance spray, and a thin blanket. No flashy brands, just high-quality, simple, well-fitted things. Nothing that made her feel pitied or indebted. She sat on the sofa holding the new blanket, her eyes blurring without her noticing. It had been so long since anyone had cared for her without conditions, without wanting something in return, without demanding a price. Nathan had never once asked about Josh, never pressured her to recount what had happened, never questioned why she had not left sooner. And because of that, for the first time in years, Emily felt she was not being judged, not seen as weak, not dismissed as a foolish woman who stayed too long. She was simply a human being who needed time to heal. And someone somewhere had chosen to remain on the other side of the door, not entering until she was ready, yet never walking away. Just there, like a light that never extinguished in the long, relentless dark. On the fourth morning, Nathan arrived. He did not announce himself, nor did he appear abruptly. He simply entered at the exact moment Emily was sitting by the window with a cup of coffee. The door opened softly, the sound of his shoes on the wooden floor barely audible, yet unmistakable enough for her to know he was there. She did not startle. After 3 days of quiet, and just enough care, Nathan's presence felt more like a gentle breeze passing through than a storm breaking in. He stood near the door, not approaching until she gave a small nod. He pulled a chair over and sat about a yard from her, keeping the careful distance she had quietly come to appreciate. They remained silent for several minutes. Neither spoke. Only the faint hum of the city drifted upward through the glass. At last, Nathan broke the silence. His voice was low and even, just as it had always been. "I know you are wondering who I am, and why I can do things an ordinary man cannot." Emily did not respond. She simply set her cup down and looked at him, waiting. Nathan leaned back slightly, his hands loosely clasped. "I am not a police officer, not military, not government. I run my own network, an off-the-grid system that exists outside the legal framework but does not break the law itself. It exists to protect people who have been harmed and abandoned by official systems, people like you." Emily felt her breath tighten. She had always sensed he was not ordinary. But hearing it said plainly sent a chill through her. What surprised her more, though, was the quiet trust blooming inside her despite the fear. He was not using grand words or noble claims. He was simply telling the truth. And that was worth more than any promise. Nathan met her eyes. "Do you know who Josh really is?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I investigated him. That same night after I received your message. Josh Turner is not someone with power. He owns no business, has no real ties to the criminal world he threatened you with. Everything he projected was hollow. The car was rented. The credit line was borrowed under someone else's name. His apartment was subleased from a friend who is in prison." Emily went still. "You are saying he never had anything at all?" Nathan nodded. "Exactly. He is no one. A man without talent or purpose who learned how to make others afraid. He manipulated you by constructing a world where he was the center, the authority, the force you could never escape. But he was nothing more than a loser, a coward who used fear to fill the emptiness inside himself." Emily sat in silence. In her mind, years of living in terror replayed like a film running backward. The times he shouted that he would call people. The nights he insisted he could make you disappear. The moments he forced her to kneel and apologize for a misplaced word. All of it built upon a lie. She had been imprisoned in a cage made of her own fear, and the key had never been beyond her reach. Tears slid down her cheeks without her noticing. But this time they were not born of pain. They were born of anger, anger at herself, anger at the lost years, anger at ever believing a man like him could define her worth. Nathan remained silent, letting her feel every emotion rising inside her. Then he spoke slowly. The truth does not heal everything at once, but it lets you see the picture clearly. And when you can see it clearly, you can decide how to redraw it. Emily wiped her tears and looked at him. I do not know if I am ready. Nathan offered the faintest smile, the first she had seen since the night they met. That is all right. When you are ready, you will know. For now, remember one thing. He has no power over you anymore, not even a little. The next morning, when the first light of day slipped through the white curtains and settled into the quiet living room, Emily sat in front of the old laptop Victor had brought from her former home at Nathan's request. She opened her work inbox, her hands trembling slightly, though her eyes no longer held the same confusion they once did. After more than a year working as an administrative assistant at the law office where Josh had been a part-time associate, she had lived in a constant state of caution. No one at the firm truly helped her when they saw the bruises. No one asked when she disappeared for days after being locked inside the apartment. Josh always hid behind that polished mask of charm and decency, convincing everyone he was accomplished, while Emily appeared to be nothing more than a timid, fragile girlfriend. She typed a simple subject line, resignation letter. She did not write long explanations, did not circle around the point. She wrote only what was necessary. Thank you for the opportunity, but I need to step away from my former environment and start anew. After she pressed send, she stared at the screen for a long moment. There were no fireworks inside her, no rush of triumph. Only a quiet emptiness, as though after closing a door that had held her prisoner for far too long, she no longer knew which direction to turn next. Nathan's message arrived at noon, just as she was preparing her first homemade lunch in weeks. Are you free this afternoon? I want to take you somewhere. She replied briefly, yes. At around 3 in the afternoon, the familiar SUV stopped beneath the building. This time, Emily walked out on her own, without needing anyone's support. She still wore long sleeves to hide the fading bruises, but something in her demeanor had shifted. She was still cautious, yet there was weight in her gaze now, the look of someone who had just placed the first stone of a new foundation. Nathan drove her to the west side of the city where tall glass towers gave way to old warehouses and low-income housing. The SUV stopped in front of a 2-story red brick building, unremarkable except for a small brass plate on the glass door that read, Bridgepoint Community Center. Inside was a warm space filled with the sound of children running, lessons being taught, printers humming, chairs scraping, and bursts of laughter. Nathan greeted a few people before leading her down a narrow hallway to a community room. There, about 10 children were drawing, coloring, and building paper models under the guidance of a young teacher. Emily paused at the doorway, hesitant. Her eyes landed on a little girl of about 8, with curly hair and wide, bright eyes. The child smiled at her without hesitation, before returning to her drawing. Nathan spoke quietly beside her. This place used to be an abandoned storage building. I bought it, renovated it, and opened it nearly 2 years ago. We support children in the neighborhood, offer lessons, teach life skills, and organize weekend activities for older residents. A small community, but a warm one. Emily still said nothing. She watched each child closely, their gestures, their faces. There was no strain, no fear, just children being themselves. Nathan continued. They need someone patient, someone with a heart that listens, someone who can teach small things like reading, writing, simple math. He looked at her, his eyes steady and calm. You studied education, did you not? Emily turned to him, surprised. You knew. He nodded. I knew, but I am not pushing you. This is only a suggestion. If you are not ready, we can wait. Emily looked back at the lively little room. A young boy was holding up his first drawing to show the teacher, his face glowing, as if he had discovered the whole world. She tightened her hand slightly. Something inside her, deep and long dormant, began to stir. I want to try, she whispered. I'm not sure I will be good at it, but I want to try. Nathan did not smile broadly. He simply gave one quiet nod, as though he had known her answer long before she spoke it. The next morning, Emily returned to the Bridgepoint Center on her own. Nathan did not accompany her. He simply sent a brief message wishing her a good day and reminding her that someone would meet her at the door. She arrived earlier than planned, standing before the red brick building. For a long moment, her heart caught somewhere between anticipation and nerves, as though she were stepping into a dream she had abandoned long ago. She was greeted by a woman in her 40s named Lorna, who coordinated the children's learning programs at the center. Lorna carried the warm smile and steady calm of someone who had weathered every kind of chaos with patience. They walked down a hallway lined with hand-drawn pictures taped to both walls, some messy, some bursting with color and imagination. Emily paused before a drawing of a house with a red roof and 4 children holding hands beside a large dog. Lorna spoke softly beside her that one was drawn by Carlos, the boy who lived in a car with his mother for nearly a year before they came here. Now he is the first to arrive every morning, and the one who never wants to leave. Emily nodded, her throat tightening around something she could not name. Inside the community room, the children had already gathered. There were around 10 of them, from about 6 to 11 years old, sitting around a table, each absorbed in their own small craft project. A blonde girl with pigtails looked up, spotted Emily, and chirped, "Are you new?" The whole group turned eyes wide with curiosity. Emily smiled as she stepped inside, while Lorna offered a gentle introduction. "This is Miss Emily. She will be here for a while, helping you learn and play together." With none of the hesitation adults so often have, the children opened their hearts instantly. A boy tugged her sleeve and showed her a half-finished drawing. Another girl invited her to join a puzzle game. The air felt warm, friendly, and unbelievably real. Emily knelt beside the table, carefully using her left hand to help the boy color the roof of the house. The trembling but determined strokes reminded her of herself at 13, standing before a chalkboard during a summer volunteer class, dreaming that one day she would become a teacher. That dream had once shone as brightly as the sun. But over the years, it had dimmed, smothered by wrong choices, by years of control, violence, and deception. She had nearly forgotten it had ever belonged to her. Until today. After the trial session, when the children ran out to the playground, Emily remained in the room with Lorna. The woman studied her quietly for a moment, then smiled. "I do not know what happened to you, but when you look at the children, I am certain of one thing. You were born to do this." Emily let out a small, genuine laugh. "I once wanted to be a teacher. But then everything went off course." Lorna nodded. "Dreams do not disappear. They only fall asleep until someone calls them back. And it seems yours woke up today." When Emily stepped out of the center that afternoon, she paused on the last step and took a deep breath. The soft afternoon sunlight felt like a wordless embrace. She pulled out her phone and sent Nathan a message. "I took the job." His response arrived so quickly, it felt as though he had been waiting. "I knew you would. Congratulations." Emily smiled, and for the first time in many years, it was not for anyone else, but for herself. Something within her was being reborn, not just a new beginning, but a stronger, steadier version of the person she once dreamed she could become. And this time, no one would ever take that away from her. Since the day Emily began working at the community center, her life gradually found a new rhythm, slow but steady, as though after years of relentless storms, she had finally discovered a quiet corner where she could rise again on her own. Each morning she arrived early, greeting the children with a smile, a warm hug, and small lessons on pronunciation, paper folding, or how to write a complete sentence. At night, instead of shrinking in fear at the sound of footsteps behind a door, she found herself waiting for the soft chime at 6:30, when Nathan would arrive carrying 2 warm meals and ask the familiar question, "Would you like Italian or Thai tonight?" They began spending evenings together that way at the small table inside the high-rise apartment where Emily was still recovering. There were no honeyed words, no hurried gestures, only quiet stories of ordinary life exchanged between two people who had walked through too many wounds. Some nights they watched an old movie, Nathan sitting silently, while Emily laughed until tears gathered at the corners of her eyes over some ridiculous scene. On other evenings he brought nothing more than garlic toast and hot soup, then sat reading while she graded the children's assignments. And on some nights they did not speak at all. They simply sat beside each other, listening to the rain, tapping against the window, soft jazz, drifting through the room, and the quiet comfort of each other's presence filling the space. Slowly, the distance between them narrowed, not through deliberate touches, but through a trust that grew quietly, hour by hour. Nathan always respected her personal space, yet he never vanished when she needed someone. When she caught the flu, he was the first to bring medicine, warm towels, and porridge. When she told him about a boy at the center who showed signs of being abused at home, he did not say much. He simply nodded and immediately called someone in his network to protect the child. Each of those small acts pooled inside Emily like drops of water filling a long empty cup. One Friday evening, when she asked about the small scars scattered across the back of his hand, Nathan told her about the night he helped rescue a young woman from a trafficking group near the border. His voice was steady, without an ounce of boasting, yet his eyes carried a quiet sorrow. Emily did not ask further, but when he stood to leave later that night, she gently took his hand, her touch barely more than a whisper. "Stay a little longer." Nathan looked at her, the gray blue of his eyes flickering first with surprise, then softening. He sat back down, and they remained together until late, saying nothing, simply letting their hearts rest beside one another. It was the first time Emily had leaned her head on a man's shoulder without feeling fear or control pressing down on her. It was just a warm, steady, peaceful shoulder. When Nathan finally left, he did not speak of love, did not make promises. He only placed a small card on the table with a handwritten message inside. "If someday you need me, not out of fear, but because you truly want me beside you, send only one word, and I will come." Emily kept that card in the drawer beside her bed. She did not reread it, but every night, her eyes drifted toward it before turning off the light. She did not know exactly what was growing between them, but she knew it was not the kind of feeling that flares brightly only to burn out. It was a closeness built from the most honest things, from wounds touched with gentleness, from a beginning that was imperfect but sincere. And in her heart, still learning how to heal, Nathan was no longer the stranger who had saved her on that fateful night. He had become a piece of the new life she was slowly, carefully rebuilding for herself. That night, the weather turned unexpectedly cold, the early autumn wind slipping through the narrow streets and making the apartment windows tremble with each passing gust. Emily curled beneath a thick blanket, sitting beside Nathan on the sofa. The soft glow of the table lamp cast a warm halo across his face, highlighting the strong, defined lines she once thought were cold. But the closer she grew to him, the more she realized that beneath that calm exterior lay a soul shaped by long battles, complicated and quietly weathered. She looked at him, her eyes blinking softly as she asked how long he had lived here. Nathan set his cup of tea down, lingered in thought for a moment, then answered slowly. "I came to America when I was a child. I was 12. My parents brought me out of Odessa, a port city in Ukraine, during the chaos that followed the war. We lived crammed into a tiny apartment in southern Brooklyn, 5 people sharing one small bedroom. My father worked at a shipyard, my mother cleaned houses. I learned English from the neighborhood kids, learning as much from their fists as from their words, because they had little patience for an immigrant who mispronounced the name New York." Emily pictured him as a 12-year-old boy, lost in the noise of a foreign city, trying to survive while holding on to the fragments of where he came from. And then what she whispered. Nathan shrugged lightly. "When I was 16, my father died in a work accident. My mother did not last long after that. I ended up on the streets. No family, no direction. I did whatever I had to do to stay alive, from washing cars to running deliveries for people I later learned were part of the underworld. That was when I understood something: to survive in a place like this, you either stay silent and invisible, or you become more dangerous than anyone who tries to harm you. Emily stayed quiet, her chest tightening with each piece of his story. Nathan leaned back slightly, eyes lifted toward the ceiling, as though replaying a part of his past he was not entirely certain he had survived. I am not proud of what I did. I have thrown punches for money, collected debts, for people I should never have worked for, witnessed things I will never forget. But I also learned how to see fear in someone else's eyes, and to recognize who was worth saving. I started building something of my own, a network that served no power, but protected those who were crushed by it. That is how I operate. And it is why, when your message reached me that night, I could not ignore it. Emily turned to him, her lips pressed together. But why me? You could have dismissed it. Anyone else would have. Nathan met her gaze, his eyes deep and dark as a midnight well. Because there was something in your voice that reminded me of my mother. She used to be beaten by the man who owned the house where she worked. She never told anyone. Every time she came home, she said she slipped down the stairs, or tripped or spilled boiling water. When I saw you, I saw her again in your eyes, in the way you tried not to tremble when you spoke, in the pain you carried so quietly because you did not want pity. Emily felt her throat tighten. His words were not meant to win sympathy, but to build a bridge, to show her that between them were parallels she had never imagined. He was not just the man who had pulled her out of a bathroom on a violent night. He was someone fighting his own past, someone who had built strength from ruin, someone who had chosen not to become a monster, despite every reason to. Gently, she reached out and touched the back of his hand. His hand bore small scars, traces of the years he had lived in the shadows. That hand did not grip her. It simply rested there, open, waiting. And for the first time, Emily did not pull away. She needed no further explanations. Her heart, frozen for so long by hurt, began to thaw before the raw truth he had shared. Not because he was perfect, but because he did not hide the things that had shaped him. And she found herself beginning to care for him, not as a savior, but as a man. A man who knew how to love through actions, who listened through silence, and who understood how to help a broken soul heal with the quiet strength of his own imperfections. That night, after Nathan finished telling her about his past, neither of them spoke again. The air in the room settled calm and still, like a lake whose last ripple had faded, leaving only the steady ticking of the wall clock and the quiet rhythm of two people breathing beside each other. Emily kept her hand in Nathan's, her heart tangled with emotions she had not yet named. She did not feel pity for him, nor regret for letting him in. Instead, she saw pieces of herself mirrored in the fractures of his life. Neither of them was whole. Both had lost, had fallen, had chosen survival over truly living. And perhaps that was why they understood one another in ways words could never fully explain. Nathan rose when the clock neared midnight, ready to say goodnight, as he always did. But as he walked toward the door, Emily found herself stepping forward without thinking. Not out of fear, but from something deeper, something that rose quietly from within. She touched his arm, stopping him, and he turned toward her. Their eyes met in a silence that needed no explanation. She stepped closer, lifted her hand to his cheek, and rose on her toes to kiss him. The kiss was as gentle as a drifting leaf, neither rushed nor heated, just a soft meeting of two people intimately familiar with loss. Nathan did not pull her in, did not take control. He simply stood there and allowed her to guide the moment. When their lips parted, Emily felt her heart pound as though she were learning how to be alive for the very first time. She could not remember the last time she had dared to touch a man without fear. But almost immediately, the old uncertainty washed back over her like a shadow that refused to be shaken. She stepped away, slightly lowered her head. and whispered, her voice raw, "I am sorry if I made you misunderstand. I just—" Nathan gently interrupted her, placing a light hand on her shoulder. "It is all right. I do not expect anything from you. That kiss was yours, not repayment, not obligation." Emily looked up at him and saw nothing but sincerity, free of even the faintest hint of calculation. It was that very honesty that frightened her. Not fear of him, but fear of herself. Afraid that if she let herself drift too easily into her feelings, she might lose the fragile freedom she had only just reclaimed. She had once loved, once trusted, had once given everything she had to someone only to be shattered by the very hands she entrusted her life to. She knew too well what it meant to be controlled under the guise of love. And now, standing in front of someone genuine, she found herself doubting her own ability to love again. Nathan took a step back, restoring the space between them. He did not look hurt, nor did he withdraw emotionally. He simply said quietly, before leaving, "You do not owe me anything, and I do not want you beside me out of gratitude or loneliness. When you are ready, you will know." He stepped out the door, leaving her alone in the apartment. Emily stood there for a long time, her hands clasped tightly together. She knew her heart had stirred with something beautiful, but also something fragile. She did not want to lose it by moving too quickly. She did not want to love someone the old way, when she had not yet fully understood her own worth. She wanted to approach love this time with steady steps, with a heart no longer shattered. And to do that, she needed more time, not to erase the past, but to learn how to live with it as part of herself. And though she sent no message to Nathan that night, she knew he understood. Because between them, words were unnecessary. Only patience and trust mattered, things neither had ever truly known, but were slowly learning to offer each other. On Friday afternoon, the last light of day stretched across the windows of the Bridgepoint Center, tinting the old tile floor a warm gold. Emily had just sent the final child off with her young mother and was tidying the tables, a small smile still lingering on her lips. She had no idea she was being watched. In recent days, there had been moments when she sensed unfamiliar eyes trailing her as she walked home, but every time she turned back, there was only an empty street or a few ordinary pedestrians. She had not told Nathan, not wanting to worry him, because she had grown accustomed to the feeling of being followed through the years with Josh. But this time the sensation was different, quieter, colder, and far more dangerous. A little past 6, Emily picked up her bag and stepped out through the iron gate. The path leading from the center to the parking lot was unusually empty. The children's laughter from the small park was absent, and the ice cream truck that often parked beneath the large maple tree was nowhere in sight. A chill crept up her spine like a sudden gust of cold wind. She walked faster, gripping her bag tighter, glancing around sharply. Just as she reached the shadowed corner where two buildings met, a gray van lurched forward, its side door sliding open without the screech of brakes. Before she could react, a strong hand clamped around her from behind and yanked her into the vehicle. A thick cloth smothered her mouth, and the sharp chemical smell made her head spin. The slam of the van door cracked through her ears just before darkness swallowed her whole. When Emily woke, she lay on an icy concrete floor, her hands bound tightly behind her with plastic zip ties. The room was small, windowless, lit only by a single sickly yellow bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air was thick with dampness and rust. She forced herself not to panic, fighting to steady her breathing. Memories clawed back, being locked away by Josh being beaten until she no longer recognized herself. But this was not the same. She was no longer the trembling woman waiting to be rescued. She knew Nathan would come for her, but she also knew she had to do everything she could to survive. The steel door clanged with the sound of unlocking. Two men entered, one tall with tattoos crawling from shoulder to neck, the other smaller but with eyes so cold they seemed to slice the air. The smaller man crouched in front of her, stared into her eyes, then let out a low laugh. "So, you're the girl, the one who made him lose control? You have no idea how valuable you are." "Who is he?" Emily asked, her voice hoarse but steady. The man laughed again. "Nathan, The kindest demon among us. He thinks he can erase everything, start over. But he forgets that the past does not die so easily. Emily tightened her hands behind her fingers working urgently toward the tiny escape pick hidden in the hem of her coat, something Nathan had taught her to keep for emergencies. No one had expected she might be kidnapped, but Nathan always prepared for the worst. While the man continued his threats, she worked furiously at the zip tie, pain burning up her wrists, yet her gaze never left him. She knew that if she crumbled now, if she surrendered, everything she had rebuilt would collapse, and she could not let that happen. Not again, not when she had only just tasted freedom. The small room was icy and damp, making each breath Emily drew feel heavier, yet her mind had never been sharper. Her fingers were raw from scraping against the thin metal hook hidden in the hem of her coat, a small cut on her palm already bleeding, but she did not stop. Nathan's words echoed in her mind like a compass guiding her through panic. If you are bound with a zip tie, use the sharp edge, pull inward, focus on one point. Do not let fear numb your hands. Emily gritted her teeth, the pressure around her wrists sending cold sweat down her forehead, but she could feel the plastic beginning to weaken. She could not stop. She must not stop. Outside, footsteps echoed. The two men returned this time, moving with an urgency that told her they knew Nathan would not stay silent once she went missing. One of them tossed her phone onto the table and unlocked it, using her fingerprint while she had been unconscious. Emily stared at it, a bold plan flashing across her mind. If she could pull it off, at least Nathan would know she was alive. She forced her expression to remain calm, lowering her eyes as if she were on the verge of tears. The larger man leaned close, raising his hand as though to intimidate her. But he did not expect that Emily was no longer the victim she used to be. The moment her wrist slipped free from the zip tie, she lunged forward, using both hands to shove him backward so hard he crashed into the metal chair. She snatched the phone from the table, pivoted, and ran toward the corner where an old ventilation grate sat loosely in the wall. Though barred by metal slats, there was a narrow gap below. She shoved the phone through it, quickly opening a notes app and typing 3 words, "Nathan, help now," then hit save. She did not have time to send anything, but Nathan had once told her he installed a system that automatically synced every change on her phone to his private server as long as the device had an active data connection. She slid the phone deeper into the wall cavity, blocking it with a scrap of paper, and turned, just as a hand closed around her. The larger man yanked her backward by the hair, shouting, "What do you think you're doing, you little—" Emily did not scream, did not cry. Her eyes met his with an unsettling calm. She knew that if she showed fear now, it would be over. In her mind, only one truth mattered. She had to buy time, make them believe she had accomplished nothing, stay alive long enough for Nathan to reach her. The second man entered, seeing the overturned chair and blood on her hands, and his expression tightened. He approached to check the restraints and discovered the severed zip tie. He barked out a warning, but before he could act, a phone vibrated from the far corner of the room. Both men snapped their heads toward the sound, their eyes locking in fear. Emily knew that moment of confusion was her only chance. She closed her eyes, silently praying the small signal had been enough for Nathan to trace her. Every second that passed now was a race with life itself. She did not know how many people were out there searching for her, but she knew one man would not stop until he brought her home safely. And for him she had to keep fighting. Not against the kidnappers, but against the fear that had once torn her apart. Because if she let it claim her again, everything she had fought to reclaim would vanish as if it had never existed at all. In the darkness of the armored SUV parked a block away from the warehouse, Nathan sat motionless, his eyes locked on the GPS signal that had just activated from Emily's phone. The message glowing on the internal system tightened his chest before he could even think, "Nathan, help now." He needed no further proof. She was alive, and she was waiting for him. The voice of the tactical team commander sounded in his earpiece, confirming the target's location at roughly 200 meters away, identifying the warehouse's deteriorating structure, 2 possible entry points, and at least 3 armed men inside. Nathan nodded, his gaze sharp as a blade. No one touches her. A simple order carrying the weight of everything he had ever tried to protect in his life. The tactical team moved through the darkness like phantoms splitting into two units. Nathan wore no mask, had no intention of hiding who he was. He advanced with the primary breach team, his familiar handgun steady in his grip, every step fueled by a contained fury he rarely allowed to surface. When the breach signal sounded, the warehouse door exploded open under a powerful kick, the echo of metal crashing against the wall, reverberating through the tight space. High-intensity flashlights swept across the room, illuminating two men near the entrance, who spun around in shock, only to be taken down by non-lethal rounds that shattered their legs. A third man leapt from behind with a raised gun, but he barely had time to aim before a team member shot through his shoulder, dropping him instantly. Nathan never slowed. He moved past the fallen bodies, scanning each room, his chest constricting with every second Emily remained unseen. A faint noise rose from the farthest room, and Nathan surged toward it, slamming his shoulder into the steel door that had been locked from inside. There she was, Emily yanked backward by the last remaining captor, a knife pressed to her throat. Her eyes were frightened yet clear, and when she saw Nathan, she did not cry out, did not beg. She simply shook her head slightly as if to say, "I'm still here." The man screamed at Nathan to stay back, or he'd kill her, but he had no idea Nathan had seen hundreds of standoffs just like this. Nathan raised his gun, his voice low and cold as winter steel. "If you touch her, there won't be a single bone left in your body." The captor tightened his grip, the knife grazing Emily's skin and drawing a thin line of blood, but she did not flinch. She knew Nathan needed just a few more seconds, only a few. And then the window behind the captor shattered, a tactical agent descending from the roof and crashing through the glass, sending the man spinning in shock. In that split second, Nathan fired. The bullet tore into the man's shoulder, making him howl as the knife clattered to the floor, and Emily threw herself aside. Another agent pulled her out immediately while Nathan lunged forward, overpowering the captor and pinning him to the ground until the clatter of handcuffs cut through his screams. The air was thick with gunpowder smoke and sweat, but for Nathan, the entire world narrowed to the moment he saw Emily being led out alive. He ran to her without hesitation, ignoring everyone else as he pulled her into his arms. Emily trembled against him, not from fear, but from the release of everything she had held inside. "I did what you taught me. I didn't give up." Nathan held her even tighter, pressing his forehead to hers, as if that alone could erase the pain she had endured. "No one will touch you again. I'm here now, and this time I will never let you fall into their hands again." The safe house where Emily was staying lay quiet beneath the late morning light. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, casting pale golden streaks across the soft gray-brown carpet. Emily sat on the sofa with a steaming cup of chamomile tea in her hands, the heavy blanket still draped over her back. 3 days had passed since Nathan and his team rescued her. 3 days of a strange mixture of relief, heaviness, and a tightness in her chest she could not fully name. Nathan had not left her side since. He had stationed 2 guards outside her door, checked the security system 3 times a day, and even attached a small tracking device to her new phone. He never ordered her, never raised his voice yet. His care weighed on her like an invisible tether wrapped around her wrists. When Nathan walked into the room carrying a bowl of hot soup, his eyes immediately sought hers in instinctive concern. "Did you sleep well?" Emily set her cup down, drew a long breath, and met his gaze directly. "I need to talk." Nathan placed the bowl on the table, sat across from her, and nodded. He said nothing, but his expression already admitted that he knew what was coming. "I know you only want to protect me. I know everything you've done is because you're worried about my safety. But I feel like I'm living in another cage. How is this different from when I was with Josh, when I couldn't go anywhere or do anything without asking permission?" "I'm not Josh." Nathan's voice dropped, neither angry nor entirely calm. "I would never hurt you. I know, but I need space to breathe. I need to walk to the park alone without 2 men trailing behind me. I need to decide when to call you, not because you expect me to check in every 2 hours. I'm not a project for you to protect. I'm a person. A woman. Someone learning how to live again. Nathan lowered his head, his fingers laced together. He remained silent for a long moment before he finally spoke. I'm afraid of losing you, Emily. When you disappeared, it felt like the world stopped. I've lived in the dark before. I've lost the people I loved most, and I swore I would never let anyone touch you again. But maybe I forgot something important, that protecting you is not the same as controlling you. I can shield you from the storm, but I can't be the one who decides the direction of the wind in your life. Emily felt her eyes sting, not from anger, but from the earnestness in his voice. She moved closer, sat beside him, and took his hand. I don't need you to disappear. I need you here, but as someone I choose to walk beside, not someone who monitors every step I take. I want whatever this is, this love, to grow from trust, not fear. Nathan lifted his gaze, his gray-blue eyes holding an emotion that defied naming. He nodded, slow and certain. I'll learn to step back, so you can step forward, and when you fall, I'll be the one who catches you, not the one who pulls you. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, her arm wrapping gently around him from the side. I will fall. There will be days I panic, days I doubt myself. But as long as you're there, patient without judgment, I'll be all right. In that quiet, they sat together as two people learning to heal, not through grand promises, but through conversation, through understanding, through the shared determination not to repeat the mistakes of their pasts. It was not a fairy tale ending, but it was the beginning of something real, mature, and deeply worth hoping for. And for the first time, Emily felt her heart truly belonging to a place she could call safe, not because it was locked away, but because it was understood. That night, when Emily stepped out of the elevator leading to the rooftop of Nathan's building, she could hardly believe her eyes. The entire rooftop had been transformed into a romantic garden drenched in soft, golden lights, shimmering like thousands of stars suspended in the night sky. Rose petals lay scattered along a pathway at her feet, woven between small pots of lavender, releasing their gentle fragrance into the air. She walked slowly, her heart pounding, without knowing whether it was from anticipation or the swell of emotions rising inside her. At the end of the path stood a small wooden table adorned with candles, fresh flowers, and 2 glasses of red wine. But what made Emily stop wasn't the table, it was Nathan waiting for her in a perfectly tailored black suit, his face composed, yet his eyes filled with tenderness. He said nothing at first, simply watched her, as if committing every step, every breath she took to memory. When she reached him, he took her hand softly and guided her toward the center of the rooftop, where a circle of white flowers formed a delicate arch like a miniature wedding canopy. A gentle breeze lifted her hair, and Nathan brushed a loose strand from her face before speaking, telling her that from the very moment she had sent that mistaken message, his life had changed. Emily let out a soft laugh, her eyes glistening. She had thought it was the worst moment of her life. He nodded, admitting that it had been the moment that brought her into his world, a moment he had never been more grateful for. He told her he had lived in shadows, believing he did not deserve anything beautiful, until she appeared imperfect, unpolished, but real, strong, and genuine. Nathan sank to one knee, pulling from his pocket a velvet blue box. Inside lay a simple platinum ring, crowned with a violet blue sapphire that reflected the night sky itself. Emily, he said softly, he could not promise her a life without storms, but he could promise to walk beside her through every one of them. He did not want to protect her like a hero, he wanted to stand with her as a partner. Marry me. For a breathless moment, Emily said nothing, moved beyond words, her heart swelling almost painfully. Then she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, a radiant smile breaking through as she whispered yes. Nathan rose, slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into an embrace that felt like the joining of two souls. The rooftop burst into light as tiny strings of LEDs flared to life and confetti rained down in a shimmering cascade. They kissed beneath the glow of candles and flowers, surrounded by the gentle music Nathan had secretly prepared. Nothing was extravagant yet. Everything was perfectly timed, perfectly placed, perfectly felt. In that moment, Emily no longer thought of the pain of her past or the uncertainty of her future. She stood in the safest place she had ever known, in the arms of the man she not only loved, but trusted with a heart that had once been shattered. And from this moment on, she knew she would never have to walk alone again. Emily and Nathan's wedding was not the grand affair one might imagine for a wealthy man who had once walked out of the shadows of the underworld, but rather a warm, intimate ceremony filled with quiet tenderness. They chose to hold it in the small garden behind the community center where Emily worked, the place where children tugged at her sleeves every day, where their colorful paintings covered the walls, and where she had first felt her life regain meaning. On a gentle autumn afternoon, beneath the bright red canopy of a turning maple tree, they exchanged vows before a small circle of people who truly mattered, several of Nathan's most trusted friends and Emily's co-workers from the center. She wore a simple white dress, not extravagant, but soft and true to who she was, while Nathan stood beside her in a charcoal gray suit, his eyes never leaving her throughout the ceremony. When they slipped rings onto each other's hands, the children seated in the front row erupted into applause, each one wearing a tiny flower pin Emily had given them earlier. A few of them even teared up, and when Emily hugged each child after the ceremony, Nathan watched her with a look of love that could not be measured. Instead of a long honeymoon, they stayed home. Emily wanted to return to the center as soon as she could, and she had also resumed her university studies to finish the teaching degree she had abandoned years before. Nathan did not object. He adjusted his schedule so he could pick her up from class every evening, always bringing hot coffee and simple late-night meals he prepared himself. They lived in a cozy apartment with a balcony overlooking a park where Emily often read in the early morning, while Nathan exercised lightly and brewed coffee. Their new life was not glamorous, but it was balanced. On nights when Nathan had to be away for work, Emily no longer felt afraid. She knew exactly where he was, what he was doing, and when he would return. And though Nathan's past had never been easy to accept, Emily learned to understand and love even the darker sides of him, because those very fragments had shaped the man courageous enough to save her, love her, and protect her at any cost. Their marriage was not without challenges. There were days Emily came home exhausted, doubting herself under the weight of coursework and the demands of the center, and there were evenings when Nathan was too occupied to join her for dinner. Yet they learned to sit together after long days and share everything from a difficult lesson in her class to a business agreement that had troubled Nathan for an entire week. Their love no longer burned with the fierce urgency of their early days escaping the past, but had softened into something steady and warm, a quiet current that nourished them both and allowed them to grow in peace and trust. Emily still carried her old scars both on her skin and in her heart, but whenever she touched them, she no longer felt pain, only gratitude. For without those wounds, she would never have grown strong enough to rise to believe in love again or to truly live. And Nathan, who once believed his life would always be swallowed by darkness, had finally found his light not in treasure or triumph, but in the gentle smile of the woman he loved every morning when he opened his eyes. A year after the wedding, Emily had graduated from her teaching program with outstanding marks and continued her work at the community center, not only as a staff member, but as the founder of a new initiative called Renewal. It was a program she had nurtured for many months, created for women who had survived domestic abuse, offering not only legal and psychological support, but also vocational training, a space to rebuild confidence, and the chance to begin a new life. On the opening day of the renewal room, the center was filled to the brim. Emily stood on a small wooden platform with a hand-painted sign behind her that read, "Welcome back to yourself." She wore a simple cream-colored dress, her hair loosely pinned up, and her voice rose not with grand rhetoric, but with a sincerity that quieted the entire room. I once sat in darkness with blackened eyes and a broken arm, convinced I was no longer worthy of love. But someone pulled me out of that place, not only with actions, but with belief. And today I want to offer that belief to those who need it. Emily's story was no longer a secret. She no longer hid her past. Instead, she spoke of it as living proof that wounds could become strength, that someone who once feared the light could become a guiding lamp for others. The women who arrived at renewal no longer felt alone because standing before them was someone who had lived through the same darkness, someone who had fallen and risen again on her own feet. Nathan remained quietly in the background, never interfering, never appearing too often. Yet Emily knew he was the one who had quietly funded the entire program. When she once asked why he did not want his name mentioned, he simply smiled and said, "Yours is enough." Emily helped more than the women in the program. She organized talks at universities, collaborated with local police to train officers to recognize and respond to signs of abuse, and appeared on small television programs to raise public awareness. She was not a hero, she was simply someone who had nearly lost everything and chose not to let that happen to anyone else. Some nights she returned home exhausted, falling asleep at her desk with stacks of unprocessed support applications beside her, but even in her restless sleep she smiled. Because she knew every email response, every grateful phone call, every relieved pair of eyes she met during a counseling session was a tiny piece of hope she had helped piece back together. A local newspaper once called her a living symbol of courage, but Emily cared little for titles. What moved her most was when a young woman stepped timidly into the center carrying a small suitcase, eyes swollen with tears, but managing to whisper, "I heard, there's someone here who understands." And Emily would walk toward her with open arms, without judgment, without urgent questions, simply offering a soft smile and saying, "You've come to the right place." In this way, she became an anchor for those who had lost their way, not because she was stronger than anyone else, but because she had chosen not to surrender. And through that journey, Emily not only helped others find themselves again. Each day she felt herself growing steadier, brighter, like a flame that had once nearly been extinguished, but now burned more fiercely than ever. That afternoon, as the last light of day poured gently through the window of their small apartment, Nathan and Emily sat together on the long sofa beside the balcony, each holding a cup of hot tea. They were quiet, not out of sadness, but because their thoughts drifted softly, like a calm river of memories running through the back of their minds. On the table lay the old phone Emily had kept as a reminder that would never fade. Its screen was scratched, yet still preserved the message that had started it all, a short plea that had changed the course of 2 lives. "Mom, please save me. Josh broke my arm." And the reply from a stranger, "You sent this to the wrong number. Are you all right?" Nathan held the phone staring at the text for a long, silent moment, before turning to Emily with a look that was half moved, half awed. "If you hadn't sent that message to the wrong number, we might never have met." She smiled softly, placing her hand over his. "But I did send it to the wrong number, and somehow it reached the right person at the right moment. Who could have imagined that a tiny mistake would become the beginning of everything?" From a night filled with terror and hopelessness, a wounded young woman found her way toward the light. From a man who thought he would forever remain trapped in the shadows of his past, emerged someone who found a reason to live with kindness and love. They had walked a long journey marked by trials, tears, fear, and moments of overwhelming relief, only to arrive at this quiet evening where they no longer resembled the people they once were, but the strongest and truest versions of themselves. Emily whispered that she had once believed her life was nothing more than a string of mistakes and pain, but she had learned that destiny is sometimes not what you choose, but what chooses you when you least expect it. Nathan tightened his hold on her hand. And it didn't begin with a perfect plan. It began with a message sent to the wrong number. That's what makes life miraculous. Their story was not merely a personal journey, but a testament to the power of faith, kindness, and the seemingly random moments that can alter a life forever. Dear friends, if you have stayed with this story until its very last moments, we believe your heart has felt something, whether a quiet ache, a spark of hope, or perhaps a reflection of your own experiences or those of someone you love. What if a single small action, like an accidental message, could become the start of healing and a new life? In this unpredictable world, miracles do not always arrive as magic. They often begin with the courage of someone who dares to call for help, and the compassion of someone who responds with unconditional kindness. If this story has touched you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it to spread these positive messages further into the community. And most importantly, leave a comment below and tell us what you feel. What do you think of Emily and Nathan's journey? Does it remind you of someone in your own life? Have you ever received a wrong number message that changed something for you? We truly look forward to hearing the most sincere feelings from your heart. Thank you for spending your precious time listening to this story with us. We hope to see you in the next videos with even more emotional journeys. May you and your loved ones always enjoy good health, a peaceful life, and days filled with warmth and love. Goodbye and see you in the next video.